Hello and welcome to another episode of Champagne Football. After a little break, we are back, and here with me, as ever, is Becky. How are you, Becky?
Doing pretty good. It's good to be back. How are you?
I'm good, and making his debut, Mr. West Ham, Alex Bartlett. How are you, Alex?
What a glowing introduction. I'm just delighted to finally make my debut as an avid listener of the show since its release last year. I'm thrilled to be here.
Yeah, well, it's a privilege to have you here as we said before, we haven't done an episode for a while, and a new season has begun, and the transfer market has just closed. So we will sort of look at those two big events in recent times. And I think we'll start with, look, I'm an Arsenal fan, Becky, you're a Man United fan, and Alex, as alluded to before, you're a West Ham fan. And I think we've all had differing transfer markets and we've all had differing starts to the season. But looking at the transfer business of your club, Alex, I wonder if you could give us sort of your emotional reaction to what's gone on, who's come in, who's gone, and at the end of it, if you could maybe give a rank out of 10 to sort of place how you feel.
Well, I mean, there's not many details needed as to who's come in, but what I would say about it is, and everyone will have been aware of what's gone at West Ham, because Mark Noble put a tweet out when we sold one of our academy players, Grady Diangana, which I'll come back to in a minute. But had that not happened, I don't think the media sort of turmoil after that has followed would have happened. And I think there is a little bit of an overreaction to how bad the window was. And personally, having been through some of the signings that we've gone through over the years of signing 3 or 4 players that don't add anything to the squad, I'm actually quite happy with a quiet window. You also have to remember, so the only incoming was Vladimir Kufal from Slavia Prague, but also you have to remember that Thomas Souček was extended to permanent this window as well. So very Czech, which is obviously close to your heart, Hal. Very Czech from us this window. And my first reaction, having watched Vladimir Kufal play on Sunday, was, has Souček got any other Czech mates that he wants to hook up and bring down? It's like bring your mate to five-a-side club at the moment. But yeah, no. So from a positive perspective, that's a good way to start. I think we'll get to the Diangana situation. I'm sure you guys will have an opinion on that, because it was one of the biggest talking topics of the window.
Yeah.
And as you know, West Ham's board is not the most loved by us fans. I just wanted to go back to Kufal. It's nice to see a sign of right back, and hopefully he's confident. He's competent, because we haven't had a competent right back since before I did GCSEs. So it's about time we sorted that out. But yeah, no, yeah. Well, I'm intrigued to get your thoughts on the Diangana situation. Actually, I'm going to sit back and stop talking, and then I'll give my view.
For me personally, he seemed very impressive for West Brom last season in the Championship, and I think when you loan out a player and he does such a good job, and he's an academy product, right? So like, it's really easy for fans to get behind those players, and it sort of. You talked about Souček coming in there, and he was a loan player, and then he came in, so it's not like a big new signing. But that's also like having Diangana come back from loan. He comes into the squad. You don't have to spend money. He comes in, but can sort of energize a squad, and that's like, it all looks lined up. Yeah, it looked lined up to sort of excite the fans, inject a bit of energy into that team. But I mean, I guess they just felt they had too many wingers. Maybe that was what they put out there. But they've also just recently let Felipe Anderson go out on loan, haven't they? So
correct.
It was a real strange one for me. I don't know what you thought about that, Becky, and what you think about West Ham so far.
Well, I think it's just a massive win for West Brom and a loss for West Ham on that one. It's hard. I mean, you look at what United has managed to do with getting Dean Henderson back in our squad after his successful loan with Sheffield, and we very easily could have lost him after that. I thought we were going to. So it's definitely hard when players have successful loan spells in other places. But I do think it's a loss for West Ham and a bit unfortunate because he's performed incredibly well.
Yeah, and just a quick word on another departure. Jack Wilshere, a former Arsenal legend, one of my favourite players. Sad to see him sort of mutually agree to terminate his contract, but it never really worked out there, did it?
Yeah, and a little bit of a behind the scenes info on that. I've heard that a few players were actually a bit miffed as to why he wasn't getting any game time the way he was training, and he made a brief appearance post lockdown when we played Chelsea. Remember, we won 3-2. He came off the bench and looked really good in that game. And I mean, I've always been a Wilshere fan as a footballer, but again, the same problems have cropped up at West Ham with the injuries and staying fit. I wish him the best luck. I've heard, we'll maybe get onto it a bit later, a few clubs that might be desperate. I've heard Sheffield United quite heavily linked with him, which I think would be a good pickup for them. And I think at the start you asked me for give my West Ham sort of transfer window grade. And what I'll just add with the Felipe Anderson point you made, and this is where I'm trying to sort of keep calm and not rant at the board, but if there's no reason why a club in Europe wouldn't have paid 20 million for Felipe Anderson, which I think is around about what you ended up getting for Diangana. Now, the only reason they wouldn't sell him is because they paid 40 million for him, and that is admitting that they made a mistake, and that is not in their psyche, Mr. Gold and Mr. Sullivan. So that was my big worry there. If you needed the 20 million to go and buy, say, Kufal, I would say I'd have happily seen Anderson go for 15, 16 million and get his wage bill off. But yeah, so for a grading for me, I would go. I'm not too disheartened, and maybe it's because of the results that have sort of happened the last couple of weeks that create some positivity. If we were sat here at 0-4, 0 points from 4 games with Liverpool, Spurs and Man United in our next 3, might be telling you a little bit of a different story. But wins against traditionally Leicester and Wolves, our 2 bogey teams, sort of have changed that opinion. But I'll go with a nice 4.5 out of 10.
Well, that's. I thought you would go a bit higher. You ended all positive, but then you gave the low score. But 4.5.
Yeah.
I mean,
well, I mean, I could go higher. I could link it up to a 5, but I think there were positions that we still needed to strengthen in, and there obviously there's this little caveat because we're obviously not a top half club. I know we're going to get on to Manchester United and Arsenal, your 2 clubs, where it's a bit different. You're not really going to be looking at Championship players, whereas we can still probably strengthen the squad from the Championship, which is still open. You can still buy that. But I'm not too fussed, and we'll get on to this, I'm sure. But the next window opens in about 10, 12 games time. So who knows?
All right. And you spoke about the emotion of winning games that can affect how you feel about your transfer business. And that leads us nicely on to Becky with Manchester United, who've suffered, a fairly humiliating defeat. And you would think maybe that would lead to some last gasp transfer business. So maybe that's why they brought in Cavani. But as you quickly finish your glass of wine, we'll lead on to you.
Yeah, definitely had to finish my drink before that one. For me, our transfers, they haven't been all unsuccessful. I'm a big fan of Tellez. I'm a huge Donny van de Beek fan, although I don't understand why he's not starting. But I do think it was a bit disappointing to see that he was our only signing in the summer. We had so much time to start to build momentum and to create even kind of some confidence with the fans, and we waited till the last day to sign 4 players. And to me, it kind of reeks a little bit of desperation. We're trying to create a little bit of change with the squad and add some depth, and we need a center back and we need a winger, and we're not signing those players. A lot of fans wanted to see Jadon Sancho come to United, and maybe he's not the player we need. He is expensive, but we do need to bring in players who are already established, not just young players that we're growing. And I do think Diallo and Pellistri could end up being great, but they're not going to fix the problem right now. And that's a bit of an issue for me. I do think Tellez is a good defender, and he will provide us with some attacking options that Luke Shaw and Brandon Williams currently don't. As a fullback, he's got a good goal scoring and assist record. But we're just disorganized at the back right now. There's a lack of communication. They're all individually talented players, but they don't play as a unit. So if Tellez can come in and help change that, that'd be great. But I think we need more leadership. And I think that's got to come from Maguire, and it's got to come from Ole as well. But I'm excited to see Cavani play. I'm actually quite pleased with that. I'm surprisingly pleased with that. So I think he could add us some excitement this year and also help mentor the young players, which we do need to build towards the future at this point.
Yeah, it was an interesting one, Cavani, because he's such a good player. He's done so much, but obviously, I don't think you need goals in this Manchester United team. But at the same time, like goals, that's what football's about. You know, you need goals. So maybe you do need them. I'm already backtracking. But my point is, from the outside looking in, surely a defender was kind of more of a better option. I was always confused about the pursuit of Jadon Sancho. I know, like, he's a generational talent. If you can get that player, you bring him in. But I did wonder if maybe they could look to strengthen in other areas, i.e. centre-back. But I suppose when you spend 80 million on Harry Maguire the summer before and it doesn't do the job, maybe you don't want to just throw money at it. Maybe you can, I don't know, hire a better coach. I mean, Alex, what's your? I know Becky really likes Ole, but I want to know what you think of Solskjaer as a neutral.
So yeah, okay. So on Solskjaer, for me, this is going to be a very difficult season again to judge Solskjaer. I think we got to a brilliant position with Solskjaer where all of the doubters from the little dip after that first initial run in when he first took over had been sort of calmed down with the run getting into top four last year. It was brilliant. But it just screams to me was it 3 summers ago now when Jose had finished second at Manchester United, and everyone laughed at the time. Everyone brings up the quote that he said it was one of his greatest achievements, finishing second with that side. But this is what happens, I think, when you don't have, and having seen it at my football club, when you don't have football people making the football decisions. And this has been the case at Manchester United for a long time now. And I'm on the fence with Ole. I think he's done a great job last year. I don't think I've seen enough to say either way. And I think a lot of Manchester United fans are the same. A lot of the talk from Ole is from the other big clubs. But how can you judge him when you look at the business Arsenal have done, you look at the business Chelsea have done, ignore Liverpool and Man City because they were already above. But I think Gary Neville said it on commentary the other day. Manchester United were in the shadows of City and Liverpool by the back end of last season, but like they've gone backwards. And you look at what Spurs have done. I don't even think, and we'll get on to top four. I know it's on your running order later, but I don't think Manchester United are in the picture at the moment.
Yeah, well, it's interesting you say that, but when I look at Arsenal, look, we were a disaster under Emery, and there's lots of issues that go above and beyond Emery. But then when you bring in a new guy who can revitalise the club, I know it's like easy to scapegoat the manager and you're sort of chancing your arm by just firing one guy, hiring another guy and hoping he changes the culture of the club. But that worked with Arsenal with Arteta, or it has worked so far. And when I look at Solskjaer, I feel like he's only ever going to get them so far. Like, you're both right to sort of not want to condemn him because I don't think he deserves to be condemned completely. But I just feel like there's a low ceiling with him. But so he's never really going to make that team evolve that far. And when you look at like somebody like Pochettino, who's a free agent, I mean, I know it's like easy to just sort of suggest a name, but that's where I would be going if I was a Manchester United fan. I would be like, I like Solskjaer, but the club's not really going to change massively. I don't think you can bring in a new signing. It's not going to change club like completely overnight, but a manager sometimes can. But maybe that's a naive opinion of mine.
I think it's not naive. I think it's a modern opinion, though, because, it's not like Ferguson did it overnight when he started with United. He took years to build that club up to the dynasty that we became. And I do think you have to give Ole a chance. And I think our club identity of having one consistent manager for so long did pay off for us because we were able to build team cohesion and a vision, and players wanted to come play for Ferguson. I don't know if Solskjaer is the right manager to make that happen, but I don't think this pattern of firing and hiring managers works for United either. So I at least if we are going to get rid of Solskjaer, I think we got to do it at the end of the season, not mid-season. I don't think that's going to work for us. We've got to give him at least another year, another transfer window to try to do something. And maybe he isn't perfect, but rotating managers has not worked for us.
Okay. And so Becky, what's your rank out of 10 then for this summer's transfer business?
I'm going to give them a 4 out of 10, maybe a 3.5 out of 10. I think there's potential with our signings. I'd like to see Van de Beek actually start some matches, maybe even start over Pogba. He actually looks like he wants to be on the pitch. So I'd like to see a little bit more heart from players like him. But I don't think it was a complete success. We didn't fill the positions I think we really needed to fill.
I guess that leads me to Arsenal then, which is I feel like we've done well on paper, but it's funny because, you know, last year everybody was saying Arsenal won the transfer market when we brought in like Pepe and Tierney and Ceballos, and everybody was getting really excited. And then that season was actually the worst league finish we've had in my lifetime. So it shows that on paper, it doesn't matter how well you do with your transfers because they've got to sort of actually turn up on the field. But saying that, I am positive about the business we've done. Willian on a free, it's fine, you know, it's a lot of money to pay for a guy who's, I think, 32 years old, 3-year contract, but he's an oven-ready Premier League winger. He can come in and do a job, and I think he's shown that already, so that's fine. He can maybe allow Pepe to grow into that role, grow into his financial tag a little better. And then Gabriel at the centre of our defence has been quite impressive. I could talk about all the players, but I think the most interesting part of this summer business obviously came on the final day when we brought in Thomas Partey. And I know that's a big name, but what I find most interesting about it is that to get him, we had to obviously pay his release clause, and we had to pay a significant chunk of that. I think it was £45 million or thereabouts, and we had to pay a significant chunk of that in one go. And to be able to afford to do that, we had to go to Stan Kroenke and ask him for a handout, a literal handout. And you know, we've all got bad owners, all of us here on this podcast for our football clubs. And Kroenke has always been a guy that Arsenal fans have pointed their finger at and said he doesn't care. And it is interesting that this time he has, maybe feeling what Arteta's doing, he's kind of backed him and given us that money. So I find that quite inspiring for the long-term future of this club, that our owners are finally maybe going to back Arteta, back the club. So that's what's got me excited. But then,
because it's because his Shiny's new stadium's been built. It's all the costs. He's built it now, so he's fine in America.
Yeah, well, he's also like married to the heir of the Walmart or whatever, you know, whoever. So she's made a lot of money during this time. So they're not strapped for cash. Yeah. So, but I would say on that, not being strapped for cash, I know Arsenal have got a lot of criticism because obviously we fired Gunnosaurus recently, which has gone viral and is really sad, and there's been a lot said about that. And I do think it kind of shows where his morals lie, that he can sort of at the drop of the hat give the club £45 million to spend on Thomas Partey, but not sort of save a guy's wages for a little bit longer. But anyway, that's all political, so I don't want to get sued by the Kroenkes.
So how would you rank Arsenal in their transfer window this year?
Well, I think we've done good at bringing in the right kind of players, but I'm sort of disappointed that we couldn't sell, you know, enough players. Like I know we got rid of Mkhitaryan for a free when we could have got 10 million for him in January. We haven't been able to get rid of like Socrates, Ozil, Mustafi, these guys. So that sort of lowers it. But I would still feel quite positive. I am quite optimistic. Again, maybe that's because we've been performing well on the pitch. But for me, I'll give it a 6 out of 10.
I like Gabriel. I like him. I think he's he's a really good footballer. So it's nice to see players like that back in the Premier League. Not back in the Premier League, but you know, particularly when you look at what position probably is the weakest in the league at the moment. That is it.
Oh, I'm just extremely jealous because we were linked to him at one point, and that's for me the center back that we needed and that we should have signed. But the next thing I knew, I was checking my phone, he was going to Arsenal. So.
It was also linked with Everton, and that leads me on to the next part, which I just want to quickly go over. In your opinion, who won the transfer market? That terrible phrase, who won the transfer market? So, Becky, who for you won the transfer market?
So I think Everton is one of my top picks for this. in part due to their big signings, players like James Rodriguez coming over, and he has shown his quality in the first few matches with his playmaking ability, his goal scoring ability, and just he seems like he's raised the overall level of the team. But also so far in their ability to keep their top players, like keeping Calvert-Lewin in their squad, and he can't stop scoring right now.
Yeah.
So hanging on to him, I think also for me makes them a winner of the transfer market.
Alex?
I've been going around in my head, and I've had two sort of click, but I think I'm going to go with the sort of one that came to me first, and that's Aston Villa. I think if you'd have told me Jack Grealish would be an Aston Villa player in 2020, 3 years ago, I would have no chance. Then he even goes on and gets better, and he's still an Aston Villa player. That's a win in itself, because he keeps you up. Keeping him, I don't see Villa going down anyway. And then you look at what they've done on top of that, and it's not just the obvious one of your mate, Mr. Watkins, obviously, and the hype will be about him because of what he did the other night against the champions. I love Matty Cash. Love Mr. Martinez. I just think everything they've done is they've spent money, but spent money on players who are, I know Matty Cash isn't a proven Premier League player, but they've spent money on players who have done it in England, have done it in the Premier League, and Watkins the same, have done it in England, and they know the culture. They're not spending 20-30 million on some unknown player from Europe. They're wise with their heads, and I think they looked together the other night. And they have looked together. I know they've only played 3 games, so it's hard to judge, and it's hard not to overreact. Because the other one I was going to say was Tottenham, because I think they've done superb business, and I wouldn't be surprised to see them challenge for a title. And that's
You're starting to sound like Harry Redknapp there.
Yeah, it pains me to say that.
I definitely have to agree with both of you, and even on the Tottenham factor. I think all 3 of those clubs have definitely had a good, brought in the right sort of player to improve their team while keeping the bulk of their squads together, which is always important going into a new season, especially for Aston Villa. I can't really look past Aston Villa for me as my favourite. They brought in Emi Martinez, who I think is good enough. He's shown that he's good enough to play for. He's starting for Argentina now, so that's how far he's come in 6 months. And then obviously we talked about Watkins, keeping Grealish. You've got John McGinn in there as well. They've just got a really nice team, Aston Villa. Everton, Alan, and Decore added to the midfield. It's an exciting team to watch. Tottenham, I won't say too much about Tottenham, but Gareth Bale will be an interesting character to see how he fits into that team. I mean, the way that Kane and Son have combined early on in the season makes them just one of the most enjoyable teams to watch. As a neutral, I'm not a neutral, but they're still enjoyable to watch when they're thrashing Manchester United 6-1. Sorry, Becky.
It's fine. Like I said, I've come to terms with it, and we're just putting it out of my memory now.
On Spurs, I think Reguilon was the bargain of the window. Like you see the amount that some of those big clubs are paying for defenders, like what Chelsea are paying for Chilwell. What Spurs got him for is just pennies. And why other clubs weren't snapping in and around that, I don't know.
Yeah, that does look like a shrewd bit of business from Tottenham. And that leads us on to the next subject, which is the big one where we all make a fool of ourselves when we look back at it in 12 months' time. But I want to know, and I think this is probably the hardest one to call for a good couple of years. Who's going to win the league, and then also just finish in the top 4? Becky, you start.
So I've struggled with this. I've got a couple picks that I think, at least 2 teams I think for sure will be in the top 4. And then I've got about 5 that are interchangeable for me. I don't want to agree with Redknapp, but I do think Spurs could win the league. It's very early days. It's very early days. It's hard to make a final call on that, but I like the way they're playing. I love the way that Harry Kane has taken over in kind of this playmaking role and his vision on the pitch. I think he's really leading the team forward right now. And you know, I really don't like Mourinho, so I would hate to see this actually happen. I would hate for him to win the league again. But I think they've got a really good shot. Then I would still put Liverpool in the top 4. I do think they will pull their socks up and figure it out. I think that the next ones are the harder ones for me to decide. But I think that Chelsea will be up there, and I think Everton will be up there. I think Everton might squeeze in 4th.
So can you just clarify though, who's going to win? Liverpool or Tottenham?
We're going to go Tottenham, Liverpool, Chelsea, and then Everton as my top 4.
Wow. If you are right, I will probably just, I don't know.
For the record, as biased as I am, I have United in 7th here. So.
Wow. That's pessimistic.
And it could be worse than that. But right now, I have them in 7th.
I think I've just sort of my biggest thing, having followed the game and followed West Ham closely for so many years, is just trying not to get too caught up in the first 3 or 4 games. Yeah. I think the league is still as much. I think Tottenham can compete, and I do think they can compete, but we have to remember it is Tottenham. The Mourinho effect is an interesting one to see play out there, but I think Liverpool are the strongest team. I think last Sunday was a blip, a complete blip. I see Liverpool winning it. I see it not being too close. I don't think we're going to go down to the final day or anything. They won't get to 90 plus points or anything, just because of the quality of some of those mid-table clubs, the players some of those mid-table clubs have signed. So I think Liverpool will win the league. Again, trying not to overreact to Man City. I still think on paper they're comfortably the second best team in the league. So I'm going to be boring and go Liverpool, City, Spurs 3rd for me. And I just can't see a way that both North London clubs don't finish in the top 4 unless Everton do. And I think the Ancelotti effect is crucial. So I've gone with Everton 4th and Arsenal 5th. I know you didn't need to fear.
Question.
I'm not very high on Frank.
Do you really think that City's defense is good enough to get them into 2nd?
I think they'll score enough goals to get them. I think this craziness is gonna slow down that we've seen in the first sort of 3 or 4 weeks. Particularly, it's gonna. I mean, it's a different game once you get fans back in the stadium. I know a lot of people have made these comments that training matches, once a team goes down, the wheels can come off, and we've seen that the last couple of weekends with City at Leicester and with Man U at home in Spurs and with Liverpool the other night. But I think City will score enough. I mean, obviously it's hard to say what. I think Mr. Guardiola's checked out in many ways, but I can't see. You look at that squad and it's just a joke. Defensively I don't like what they've done, but who knows.
Yeah, I mean, they have just brought in Diaz as well. So, you know, they've got another new centre-back to partner Laporte. So I think between those two, obviously they don't really have a left-back with Mendy not convincing. But I think between those two, and as Alex said, with their ability to score, I think they'll be right up there. I do think this could be a really tricky season for Liverpool. It's so hard to maintain, you know, Klopp's style of high intensity, especially when there's not really been a summer break, and it's so weird. What I find interesting about Liverpool at the moment is the way that they've been playing this high line. And I know a lot of people criticising it, and obviously against Villa it was a disaster. But I think the new high line could be kind of the new passing out of the back. Do you remember when that first got introduced and teams were doing it and City were doing it and getting sort of caught out and conceding cheap goals, and everybody in England was saying, why are they passing out the back? And I feel like soon, next time Liverpool get caught out again with a high line, that conversation will come up. Why are they doing it? Why are they doing it? But you have to trust Klopp. It's what Bayern Munich are doing as well when they've been criticised for playing a high line. But you have to trust these managers. They're trying to evolve. But in the short term, that could be an issue, which is why I think this season we won't have a dominant team. It will be quite flaky. We won't, like Alex said, we're not going to get 90, 100 points. It's going to be a lot tighter than that. But I still think Liverpool probably have just enough in the tank left to get them across the line and win the league again, back to back. And again, with City, I think those two teams are just a cut above the rest, regardless of form and all the rest of it. And even if Guardiola has checked out, I think they're too good. So for me, it'll be first Liverpool, second City. This is where it gets really complicated, and depending on how many drinks I've had and what time of the day it is, my opinion will change.
I was going to say, we haven't even mentioned Chelsea yet, all the signings that they made, and are we all low on Lampard on here?
Yeah,
I would put Chelsea as finishing third in the season in my table. So I do think that they've had a successful window. I'm not convinced yet on Lampard, just because I think he did a really good job with what he was given to work with last year, and now we get to see what he can do with signings as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think Lampard's a shit manager. I'll just put it out there. But I think he's been given such a good squad that they will probably just have too much quality. And it might take them a little while to gel, because they've brought in a lot of new players, and that will naturally take time to sort of get that squad working well together. But yeah, that's why for me, I think they will just squeeze top 4. And because I love Mikel Arteta and his beautiful, perfect Lego hair and his ability to speak many languages, I think Arsenal are also going to squeeze 4th. I don't know. I think they'll get 4th, and I think Chelsea will get 3rd. I think Tottenham and Everton both easily could also take up those spots. So it's hard to really commit to an answer. But in this moment, so early on in the season, looking at what's happened over the summer, I will go Liverpool first, City second, Chelsea third, Arsenal 4th. So we've done what we think will happen at the top of the table. But Alex, can you tell us what you predict the bottom 3 will be?
It sounds foolish, because predicting the bottom of the table is always a bit of a killer, and you always get surprises. But I think for once we have a year where I didn't struggle finding my 3. Too obvious. I would be very surprised if we don't all say 2 of the teams. I really hope not, for West Brom, being a big Slaven Bilic fan, and I think they will shock a few big teams. And Slav was very good at that when he was at West Ham. The way they play, they'll score goals. They will shock a few big teams, but I just don't think they'll have enough. And we've seen when they've played the weaker teams so far this year, they've not fared too well. So I think they're gone. I think Fulham, again, they were never going to spend money because of what happened 2 years ago. But just where do you start? And I feel sorry for Scott Parker, because I think it's almost like Derby's points record. Well, low points record could be in danger. It's that worrying with the goals that these other teams have got in them. And the third one for me, and I mean, I think it will be close between. And there were 2 or 3 teams I had floated around, Sheffield United being one of them. I think people have figured out how to play against that system, and you see it happen to a few of those clubs. But for me, it's going to be Burnley. I think Dyche is checked out. There were rumours at the end of last year that he didn't want to be there, and you look at their window, and the phrase underwhelming. I do think they'll go and sign some Championship players, but I mean, underwhelming, bringing in like Dale Stevens. Did they bring in Gibson, who looked horrific at Norwich last year? So I don't think they've done enough, and I think Dyche is a bit checked out. And in a year where we're seeing lots of goals, solidness isn't gonna cut it.
Yeah, it's funny, because of all those 4 teams you linked, they were the 4th for me. I mean, Fulham, I think we're all agreed, are already relegated, essentially. Sounds harsh, and I don't know when the last time I would have thought that about a team 4 games into the season, but it's just hard to see them clawing themselves back into this sort of season. So, and then West Brom, I agree with everything you say about them. Like, maybe a few surprises. I think they're a decent team, well managed, but just don't have enough to keep them up. So I think I'll be sad to see them go, but not that sad, to be honest. And then it is between Sheffield and Burnley for me, and that's kind of like I would flip a coin to decide. I think Sheffield, they did do so well last season. We can't underestimate them. And same with Burnley. They've been in the league for so long that it seems ridiculous to just sort of, off the back of a slow start and a poor summer, maybe, to dismiss them. But I look at Sheffield and the way that they've swapped Dean Henderson out for Aaron Ramsdale. That seems a big downgrade. So I think for me, I will go Sheffield as my 3rd team. Becky?
I mean, it's not very exciting to agree with both of you, but I think we have the same 4. For me, I think Fulham and West Brom are a no-brainer, unfortunately. I mean, I always wanted to see Brentford come up, obviously, last year as well, but I think that Fulham's already gone. West Brom will get some good, exciting games this year, but I don't think they're staying up. I think Sheffield want it more. If we're coming down to heart and how much they want to stay in the Premier League, where it does seem like Burnley, like Alex said, might be a bit more checked out. But it's really hard to call. I think Burnley will go down, but I think it'll come down to a battle between those two for that last spot. And I think Sheffield have the ability to fight for it and to stay up and to like when it comes down to those games, put more heart into it, basically, which isn't necessarily, you can't predict that, of course, but I do think they want it more, and I think we'll see them stay up at least for one more season.
Yeah, I would say one thing we can't sort of we may have to factor in later on in the season is if fans return to the stadium. That can be so uplifting. You don't know how it's going to change the form. It could literally, inspire a relegation-bound team to turn their fortunes around overnight. So we'll have to see if fans can get back into the stadiums, by the end of the season. Then, yeah.
I was just going to say, if you look at it, it was the first year I can remember since sort of the mid-2000s where there are so many of those mid-table clubs outside of the top 6 that can hurt. Well, we'll call it a top 7 with Everton, with the money that they've spent, with the ability to hurt those big teams. Like you look at Leicester, Wolves. I think Newcastle can hurt big teams. I think West Ham. I think Southampton. Palace, I haven't mentioned. I think all of these clubs will get results against big clubs this year, and I think that mid-table is going to be very. It sounds very Formula One, but almost if you take Mercedes away, and I do think the top this year is going to be closer, obviously in the Prem, but it's very interesting, and that mid-table battle. Not that it's for anything. Wolves I didn't mention either, but there's a lot of teams there. It's very congested.
Anyways, it's been really, really great to be back. We've had a bit of a break from the Champagne Football Podcast, but it's been wonderful to be back. As always, Hal, it's been a pleasure.
It's been wonderful.
And Alex, making your debut on the podcast today, how was the experience for you?
Yeah, very, very, very enjoyable. Very expected to be enjoyable. I hope to see you guys regularly back. Especially seeing some of I'd love to see some of the old guests coming back as well. Ben Chappell, I'd like tuning in from America. I miss those guys. Yuppie. Be good to see some of the old guys wheeled out.
Alex is name dropping over here now. We'll see what we can do about it. But for now, it's been a great episode of Champagne Football, and hopefully we will be back soon.
Cheers.